Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. Cheers. Lifting my cup up to you here on the YouTube channel. If you're here, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel. You get updated when new episodes come out. You get the ability to search the library of different episodes that we have, where I haven't even counted recently, but I think we're close to 1,000 episodes of Keys to the Shop. It's been about 8 years and some odd months of doing the show. And there's probably something that is going to focus on what you need for your coffee shop right now or your career in coffee. And today's episode is actually a little bit of a walkthrough of a topic that I will be giving a workshop on in Coffee Fest New York, Coffee Fest trade show that I've been a part of for quite a long time, coffeefest.com. But just letting you know, I'm going to be there at all the shows this year. So hopefully you get to say hi. I actually have a booth this year. Not going to be anything fancy, particularly being the first year having a booth of note, but I will be there, in and out while I'm not speaking to say hey and have a conversation with you. So anyway, one of the things I do is I work one-on-one with coffee shop owners and operators to help them deliver value to their customers, to help them refine their operations, their people, the quality of their product. And this happens through cafe assessments, one-on-one coaching. We do barista training, large-scale projects and short-term projects. I've worked with over 80 different individual operators and businesses over the last 8 years of doing Keys to the Shop. And I'd love to have a conversation with you and see if there's something that I can help you with in your cafe to bring clarity, profitability, and just help you thrive as a person and as a business. So Chris at keystotheshop.com is where you can reach out. And feel free to DM on Instagram as well at Keys to the Shop. But you also are not too late if you're listening to this and you wanted to be a part of our mastermind groups. They are called key holder coaching groups. 5 to 6 people per group over the course of 6 months meet together to help each other succeed, problem solve, encourage, support. These are coffee shop owners who are all trying to run people first operations and do good and feel good doing it, right? So we've been running these for 3 seasons now. The 4th season is probably going to be launching in the beginning of April. So if you're interested, you can apply. You can reach out, Chris at keystotheshop.com. Don't hesitate to do that. If you've been on the fence, it can't hurt to just have a conversation. I'd love to talk with you. So today's episode is brought to you by our friends at Arto Brick, arto.com, at Arto Brick on Instagram. For hard surfaces, tiles, and stonework, as well as the Pacific Barista Series, that line of plant-based performance beverages that is known and loved the worldwide. And so we're going to talk more about both of them later in today's episode. But right now, I'm going to dive straight into what we're going to talk about, which is the idea of delegation. We have an old episode. I have no idea how old this episode is. It's called Don't Just Do It. It's actually a shift break, I think. But Don't Just Do It is all about delegation. And you, as an entrepreneur, probably are the type of person who likes to do everything yourself. Because you know how to do it, you know how you want it done. You hold the vision. You're the visioneer, as they say, I think in Disney, or it's an old, outdated Disney term. But you are that chief vision officer and so forth. So therefore, it makes sense for you to do everything, and it's hard to let go of everything. And you don't actually need to let go of everything. We're not fans of the idea of having a hands-off approach to running a business. Now, we're also not fans of being micromanagers, which actually is a pretty hard thing to do. There's a mix-up when it comes to being a micromanager. You actually probably are undermanaging, as our friend Bruce Tulgan talks about. But that's a rabbit trail. The point is that when you let go of certain things, it can be pretty scary because it seems like a risk. You're not in control. And that means that you now need to shift the way that you operate. You've become used to doing everything. And it's kind of like the devil you know. You kind of wish that you wouldn't be on the hook for grabbing all of the stuff from Restaurant Depot. You don't want to be on the hook for doing all the ordering and all the scheduling. You don't want to be the one to cover all the shifts and that kind of stuff. But the idea of giving it to somebody else means that you're not in control. Or it kind of forces us to say, what's involved in the ideal situation here? Like, who would I trust? And therefore, the fear of delegation actually causes us to overestimate what's needed for the job that we're doing because of being so close to it. And so all of a sudden, nobody can do this. No one's good enough to do this. When in reality, we're not even that good at it. we're just in control. And so we think they're either going to be better than me or nothing. And so everybody gets looked at with very like a fine tooth. We put a fine tooth comb through everything. But for ourselves, it's kind of like we're not doing that. We have I would say subconsciously, a slightly lower standard for ourselves, an allowance for mistakes for ourselves, even though we think, well, I know how to do it, versus what we try to apply to other people and say, well, they have to be of this stature, they have to have this kind of character. I'm not saying you don't have standards, but sometimes I think we overestimate what's needed for delegation. And so it just builds up and it backs up. And we run out of room mentally and emotionally, and frankly, physically, to operate well. And so people just see you stressed out, they have pity on you, or they're just angry. Is one or the other, really. I mean, a barista who views a on the edge boss is either going to go the direction of empathy, or like, oh, that feels so bad. I would, I hope they're okay. Or somebody who's like, they just don't know what they're doing, and this feels toxic in here. It's being made to be my problem. I have enough problems in my life. I'm going to leave. So all of that to say, delegation of responsibility is a natural next step in running a business. And running a business has more to do with managing the work being done in the business than it does actually working in the business. The classic Michael Gerber E-Myth Revisited phrase, which is working on the business, not in it. That doesn't mean you don't work in the business. You still are going to have your hand involved, but it shifts from the work sometimes, oftentimes, and it then goes into helping lead, manage, and resource, cheerlead, and coach people who are doing the work. And if you want to make an impact, you've got to make an impact with other people. It's not a solo operation with, some team members that you sometimes acknowledge. And sometimes you'll have a coffee shop has many, many staff members, and they're so narrowly focused in their work, they could do so much more. But because of fear and procrastination, and like we talked about before, they're not allowed to grow. But then we complain about how they're not responsible or how they're not engaged. But we're not engaging them in the work that they can do and might want to do. We're not proposing these things to them because we're just too used to the day in, day out. Again, devil, I do everything mantra. I give this analogy sometimes or it's not an analogy, it's just an example of how we can become very used to a dysfunctional system, and it becomes kind of an endearing thing to us. Like we like it almost. It's a strange thing. I worked in a cafe a long time ago where I tell this story because leadership somehow could not get a knockbox to replace the broken knockbox for like 2 weeks. No excuse there. We baristas just used what we could. Okay. We used a broom handle, some duct tape, and a trash can. And we used it for a couple of weeks. And baristas, and we had I don't even know if we named it or not, but we became pretty familiar with it. And pretty soon your muscles start to get used to it. You reach for it. And then when you get the new knockbox that you should have gotten before, you end up thinking, oh, kind of missed the duct tape. It had kind of a good sound to it when it hit on there, do we have any pictures of it so we can remember it? So we end up feeling this almost a Stockholm syndrome, where we're in love with the thing that was, oppressing us in some way. So all that to say, we in the cafe in leadership have a hard time letting go of something because we've become used to the dysfunction. And intuitively, we know if we let go, it means we're going to have to grow in ways that are uncomfortable. Growth is a stretching process, and it'll be uncomfortable for you and it'll be uncomfortable for the other person. And frankly, costs are going up and we're just getting used to the idea of running a coffee bar. Oh boy, taking on my own discomfort with now leading somebody in a new task, and which they're uncomfortable with at first, feels like a big thing that I don't want to do. So I'm just going to keep going until I can feel the tingle, the spidey sense that now I'm ready to delegate. And you're not going to feel that. You probably won't. Unless you get juiced up and get all righteous at Coffee Fest when you come to my workshop or you hear somebody speak. But then on the plane ride back, you probably talked yourself out of it. So there's no perfect time to actually do this, except for the time that is basically today. Not just sloppily, but let's talk about exactly what this entails. You don't want to give away everything right away. There is a art and a science to delegation, which has to do with the atmosphere that your new responsibility is entering into. In other words, you have to consider the person, consider the culture. It's like when you propose a new beverage to a team of baristas who are very, very strapped for time and space, and they're doing all they can with what they have right now. And sometimes the well-meaning and very creative leader will throw a bunch of ideas in there, and unbeknownst to them, it's just making everybody crazy. And they're worried, they're stressed out. That what's happening is we're not regarding the culture and atmosphere and all of our ideas. We wonder why they burn up upon entering that atmosphere, because it's the friction, it's the atmospheric drag of that environment that we didn't account for. This is what NASA does. They understand that in order for something it has to absorb heat, it has to be built to compensate for the atmosphere it's entering into. So when we delegate, sometimes we'll either not do any delegation, and then we end up with a rather anemic workforce and we blame it on the generation or something, but we never gave anyone opportunities to grow. And frankly, by keeping all that stuff yourself, you're not really growing either. Or B, we are over delegating and we're actually doing it irresponsibly by saying, okay, there are like 6 things that I really don't want to do, and I'm going to give them to this one person and they're going to do them next week. It doesn't work very well. So we got to find a middle ground. And that middle ground is what 1 or 2 things can you give to a person who has demonstrated responsibility in the cafe and you have been engaged in conversation with to know enough that this person wants more responsibility. Then you can give them just maybe it's scheduling, and it's just one thing. Now you might think, well, now that I've got the idea that I want to delegate everything so I can just get it over with, right? I just want to rip the Band-Aid off. In this case, I don't think that's the answer. The answer is, what's the most important thing that you can delegate? And you can use the one thing methodology. The book, The One Thing, teaches the question of what is the one thing that I can do that, if done, will make everything else easier or irrelevant. So, for example, it might be the schedule, because there's a lot that goes into it. Now, if you can train one person, and I say train because it's not just like throwing a hot potato to somebody and saying, now you do the schedule, figure it out. That's called trial by fire. That's not fair. And, sometimes people do that almost, I feel like, a way of sabotaging the very idea of delegation from the beginning. And then they can say, well, see, that didn't work. Well, we never set them up to actually get trained to do that, because that it means we need to understand how to teach somebody to do something. See, delegation is not just passing something off onto somebody. It is coaching and training them to do it very well, but understanding enough of what you do and what's valuable about what you do in order to teach it. So you have to be a teacher, and you've got to be patient and give them the opportunity to grow into their ability with the schedule. So there has to be some standard operating procedures for, I'm using the schedule as an example. This could be virtually anything. It could be inventory and ordering for you. It could be events. If your cafe does events and you are not wanting to be there for the events, but you got an ambitious barista that wants to do that, no matter what it is, it has to have some kind of a procedure that I would encourage you to talk with the person about and say, here are the important things about the scheduling or event management. And what do you think? Well, let's create this together, because now you're passing this off onto them. You want to have some ownership. They can have some ownership in the process of refining the thing that you have painstakingly and somewhat organically built. You built a certain way of scheduling. A lot of it's intuitive. I've talked with people that say they still take on the scheduling because they know the personalities of their baristas so well that they can know who to pair with who. Now that needs to be corporate knowledge. That can't just be like one person's, precious knowledge that only one person has, even if it is the owner. I think that kind of stuff is an opportunity for organizational self-knowledge. And this delegation is a way for you to understand what you're doing, because you might do it, but you don't understand it very well until you teach it. And then when you look at it under a microscope like that, when you're now passing it off onto somebody else, you learn a lot about maybe you weren't doing it as well as you could have. And in the process of delegation, you actually become aware of some issues. And that person can actually tell you about those things sometimes, and you wouldn't have talked to them before about it. Maybe they didn't feel comfortable bringing it up to you, but there's a lot of solutions that come through this process of delegation. And for something like a schedule, you might be looking at a month to 2 months of regular scheduling and oversight and coaching, where you gradually back off more and more till the person is autonomous in this. Do you take your hand off the wheel completely and just, leave the country and come back every quarter to check on the business? No, of course not, right? But you also now have confidence that that person can do it. And that is how you free yourself up to do other things. And nobody is going to feel mentally or emotionally free when they delegate the wrong way by passing off a task onto somebody that is untrained, and they don't train them, and you haven't really done the work to understand what it is you're teaching and the process that that person has to follow, and then seen them do it regularly enough to have confidence in them. That's when you free yourself up. The big phrase that you hear a lot at Coffee Fest, you hear it online with consultants and everyone else, and I'm just like them in that sense, where I will say, yeah, you want to free yourself up? Good. There are some things you do need to be free from, because if you open a second store, if you have a larger staff, if you take on food, your presence is going to be necessary as the agent of resourcing, clarity, guidance. And then eventually you come back to this idea of equipping people to successfully take on the work that one person by themselves cannot do. Even if you're a small business, a very small business, you're still going to have the need to delegate. And that confidence that comes from that process of thoroughly preparing the individual for the role or the task that they're taking on is going to make you a lot more free to actually do the work of working on the business and not in it. And so again, this is something that we're going to talk about in a workshop. It's a 90-minute workshop at Coffee Fest. It's kind of a new one. But I view this as one of the biggest issues in coffee, outside of the fact that we just got done talking about last week about onboarding and training. And hiring the right people. You can kind of go in line here with what's the most important thing from 1 to, I don't know, 5. Maybe I'll do more. But the first one is knowing yourself and your vision well enough and your values to hire the right people to begin with, and have a plan for what compensation and resourcing those folks with finance and resources outside of finance looks like. Once you get those people, you have to train and onboard them. And training and onboarding is something that you're always going to be refining. It's an always forever thing. Training especially. It's just like making coffee for a barista. You don't stop making coffee as a barista. It doesn't matter what the super automatic people say. Anyway, I won't go down that road. But you will always make coffee because that's what you do. And you will always be refining and setting up systems to help people succeed in your coffee shop and coaching people and training people. So you've got to set them up to succeed that way. Then you are going to be raising up leaders in the business in different areas through delegation. That is a part of training. That is the next step, right? And these people have proved themselves to have certain niche talents and skills through what you've observed in your regular communication and one-on-ones and engaged leadership. And from there, we are able to build a resilient cafe that has a consistently excellent product, hospitality presence, and people feel cared for behind the bar, across the bar. You can then feel comfortable adding on another concept. Oh, we want to do events. Oh, we want to do open up a commissary kitchen or something like that. But all the stuff I just said beforehand needs to be part of your self-discovery and organizational growth before you can even think about taking on extra stuff. Because you look around, if you can visualize this, in a lot of cafes, they're very top heavy. They are full of programs, full of menu items, and let's do this, let's do that. And all of that is fine if it was born from a base layer, a foundation of resiliency and process that might frustratingly take longer than you thought it would. But once you get there, it's more solid. So fast growing trees are not very dense. It's not hardwood, right? Hardwood is very prized for its endurance, its ability to stand the test of time. I'm recording this episode. You see my bookshelf behind me. This desk here was salvaged by my father-in-law. It's like from the 1800s. It's oak. He got it for like $10 in someone's garage, but it's still going strong. And it's because the tree took its time to kind of build itself, through the nurturing process that trees go through. Point is that all of our cafes and all the scaling that we do and the things we try to pursue sometimes fall flat because we don't actually invest enough into the process. And then we blame the concept itself. Oh, there's no market for this. Or I guess it just wasn't in something the customers wanted, or it was the people who did its fault. But we didn't give, in this delegation example, we didn't really set someone up for success truly, and didn't think through the problem long enough to come up with a fair and a solid transition from I do everything to I lead people who do various things that contribute to everything. So the way you grow as a business depends on how you approach this, but also the way you grow as an individual. One of the things you should ask yourself is, are you ready to be successful? We can think about this from the perspective of somebody who is putting together a menu. When I coach folks on opening a coffee shop or refining their menus and their systems, we're talking about, what if everybody wants what you're offering and they tell their friends and they all come in? Are you ready for that? Do you have the systems in place? Do you have the ingredients? What would happen if you were successful? And kind of some weird way, we would complain about not being successful. It's really slow today, but we're not really prepared to be busy. And there's some part of us that feels like, oh, thank God I wasn't busy, because we would have been sunk, right? Because our systems just can't handle that. Same thing here with who you are as a leader. Having to let go of something you're familiar with and then teach somebody else, and have patience and self-awareness to know that maybe you're not teaching very well. And it's sometimes going to be a humbling experience to do this. Okay. That's the kind of thing that you need to go through in order to gain the ability to handle more business in the future. So we've said this in a previous episode. If I took you right now and you just opened your first coffee shop and it's month 6, and I said, okay, feel like you've had enough experience running a coffee shop now, I'm going to put you in charge of this 12 coffee shop chain in Colorado Springs or something. It's been around for like 12 years and you should be fine. And you'll think, no way am I going to be fine. I have not learned enough. I don't have the personal resiliency to handle that kind of a workload. And you'd have to ask yourself, what things, this is an extreme example, but what things do you need to be participating in order to grow as an individual, as an operator? The answer is, operating as a coach and a leader of people who are doing things to create the experience that is your brand. And so that's where delegation comes in. That's why you don't just do it. You have to eventually give that to somebody else so that you can grow into the kind of person who can lead a more developed business. You don't have to get 12 stores, right? You can just stick to 1 or 2, but you still want to personally grow as the business grows so that you can grow other people. And I feel like that is why delegation is so important. It's why it's how you can be effective. It's how they can be effective. We always talk about wanting the staff to be engaged. And in order for staff to be engaged, they need to be engaged with by leadership. And the tasks that happen on the bar day in and day out, frankly, they are, of course, monotonous. We talked with Maxwell Dashwood about this philosophy of excellence in maintenance. The maintaining of excellence across the same menu, day in, day out, has its own sort of beauty, but the drone sets in sometimes. And instead of compensating for this by sending people outside the cafe to feel inspired by this narrow range of professionals on the competition circuit or magazines, we can be the inspiration to people because we are showing interest in them, because we are giving them opportunity to grow, because we're excited to do it for them, to provide that platform where they can showcase their talents more than just pouring latte art. Why do you think latte art is so popular? It's visually appealing. It's an accomplishment that a barista makes. It's an artistic expression. It pushes a little bit beyond the boundaries of where the coffee shop has allowed them to go. So it's an expression of a professional pursuit that fits in line with the business. You could make scheduling like latte art. It's not, you're not going to have people online posting their schedules being like, look at this awesome schedule. And talking about the way they do like a 5-tier or 10-tier tulip. That would be weird. But I don't know, maybe you will. Maybe it's like the roasting curves that people post as though we're all supposed to be, gasping behind our phones, being like, ooh, wow, look at that. But the point is we are missing out on opportunities for internal enrichment through effective delegation opportunities for our customers, our staff, ourselves. So let's pursue it. Let's do it as a means of caring and facilitating success. And let's get excited about the possibilities of what it looks like to build this well-resourced team of people, very engaged, very capable. That spells success to me. So a little bit of a shorter episode today for the main episode, but I just kind of wanted to also kind of tease out that new workshop for this year at Coffee Fest. And encourage you to go to our show notes where we have episodes related to this one, where you can deep dive the topic and maybe go into some other directions that will help you. I told you in the last episode of the show last week in the description, I always think it would be a good idea to saturate yourself with the topic itself across maybe a few different episodes. And it doesn't have to just be Keys to the Shop. Of course, we can other podcasts or books and things. And then pull together the things that resonate and make sense to you. And once you do that, you have the ability to say, okay, now we're going to take action on this and this and that, and go for it. Put it into action and water it, nurture it, and watch it grow. That's the best possible scenario that I can think of for all of you as listeners, not just content consumers, but doing the stuff that is necessary to see differences made in the real work of the coffee bar. That's how we make a real difference. So if you have any questions or comments about today's episode, go ahead and email chris@keystotheshop.com. Also, if you're interested in keyholder coaching groups, still opportunities there for you to apply. New groups start in April, the very beginning of April. So reach out, let's talk. And of course, one-on-one consulting and coaching is always available through Keys to the Shop Consulting. And I'd be happy to chat with you there as well. So thanks, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe and share these episodes. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.